Chris Chloupek here. Who says the Bible isn't the most exciting book on earth? Of course it is. It's from God. And my name is Chris Chloupek with another amazing, exciting Bible story. God testing Abraham. Before this story, you can read about the unfolding of God's great promises. Abraham and Sarah finally bore a son, and his name was Isaac. Now we're going to learn of Abraham's true devotion to God. Will he, after waiting decades to have a child, choose his relationship with God over his son, inspired by the book of Genesis? At last, Abraham held his son in his arms. Sarah and Abraham, after decades of falling on their knees and begging for a child, had finally seen their prayers answered by God. Isaac was growing into a young man with the love and affection of his parents. Abraham savored every moment he had with Isaac, for he knew his days were numbered, already being so advanced in years. Abraham and Sarah experienced the joy of raising a child together and the highs and lows of parenthood. Abraham held closely to God's promises, remembering that God had promised to make Isaac the son that would bring and make as many descendants as the sand on the seashore. One day, God came to Abraham, yet this time he did not come with a promise, nor did he come with a warning. Instead, he came with a command that would test Abraham's faith to its very core, a command that would break him completely. Abraham, God called out. Here I am, Abraham replied. God, with no warning or explanation or promise, spoke plainly. Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, up into the mountains of Moriah and offer him as a sacrifice to me. Abraham was faced with a command so devastating and seemingly cruel that it could quite possibly be the end of him. Yet God had showed him his compassion and his power and his faithfulness before. God had promised Abraham from Isaac would become a great nation of people. If this was God's command, there must be something greater at work. So Abraham rose early at work, saddles his donkey, and took Isaac along with two of his men. Abraham began chopping the wood, the axe methodically, quickly cutting the kindling of the wood that would burn his son at the altar. How painful it was to prepare the altar where your son would be murdered. Sweat fell from his brow and tears from his eyes. Abraham rose with his eyes toward heaven and took Isaac to the base of the mountain. Abraham turned toward his men and said, "Stay here with the donkey. My son and I shall climb the mountain to meet with the Lord and worship." Abraham and Isaac climbed the face of the mountain. Isaac, still unaware of what his father was asked to do, helped him carry the wood up to the altar. Abraham prepared a fire and laid the wood on the altar beside his son. Seeing the turmoil deep in his father's eyes, Isaac spoke. "My father." "Here I am, my son," Abraham replied, looking down at the wood, refusing to meet his son's gaze. "We have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham could hardly bear the words coming from Isaac's mouth. "Oh, my son, God will provide himself a lamb or something, I'm sure." Anguish filled Abraham's heart and mind. He took the ropes and bound his son to the altar. Tears streaming from his face, he laid Isaac on that altar. Abraham, God's chosen hero, stood over God's son. The supposed father of nation, poised to slay his only child, raised the blade high in the air with his eyes looking toward heaven, and faith welling up in his heart that God would make this right somehow. Abraham prepared to descend his knife right into the heart of Isaac. In that instant, the heavens opened up, booming from the sky. A voice from the sky bellowing from the mountaintops, "Abraham, Abraham! The voice cried. Trembling on the floor with tears, Abraham managed a response. Here I am. God said, do not strike your child. Your faith in me will be spoken of for all of eternity, for not even your own son could keep you from worshiping me. Abraham finally lifted his eyes, and there in the thicket beside him was a ram caught by his horns. There he and Isaac sacrificed the ram to God on the altar, and they named the mountain, the Lord will provide. For God is the one and was the one who would provide the ultimate sacrifice. A second time God spoke, since you did not withhold your son from me, I will make his name great, as the stars are adorned in the sky and the grains of the sand scattered across the shore, so I will expand your offspring. Greatness shall follow you. After that, Abraham and Isaac left the mountain. God would not require Abraham to sacrifice his own son. God, most of all, knows the love one has for their children, for God himself is love. And because of this love, God would one day send his own son to be sacrificed for all. For the Garden of Eden, the Ark of Noah, and the son of Abraham were all pointing to a greater and more glorious promise, one that would truly bless all nations and generations to come. Now that's a fabulous, exciting Bible story. Stay tuned for the next one. Chris Chloupek out.